Good afternoon.
My name is Ashland Thomas, Associate Director for Programs here at the Center for the Study of Southern Culture. Thank you all for joining us. Our SouthTalk series is made possible by a dedicated team. Thank you to my center colleagues, Rebecca Love-Cleary, who promotes our events on social media and our website, Andrew Bryant, who is the center's operations manager, and the center's director, Dr. Katie McKee. I am grateful to work with two amazing Southern Studies graduate students, Assis Shrestha for recording and editing each SouthTalk, and Deja Samuel for creating beautiful graphics and helping with programming logistics. Two quick announcements. If you haven't already, please sign in. There's a sign-in sheet going around. We will send you a brief survey following this event, so please be sure to click that link and share some feedback for us. We have another SouthTalk scheduled for this Friday, September 19th at noon in this room. We will be joined by UNC Associate Professor of Sociology, Dr. Regina S. Baker. She will present a talk titled, "Is the Past Really Past? Historical Racial Regimes and Contemporary Poverty in the American South." This SouthTalk is a partnership with the UM Department of Sociology and Anthropology. You can find more information about this talk and others on the center's website, follow us on social media, or sign up to receive our monthly newsletter. Now to introduce today's SouthTalk speakers. Most of us have heard the saying, okay, fill in the blank, a picture is worth 1,000 words. When Joe Moody shared his idea for an exhibition with me and a few others here at the center, I was immediately drawn to the photographs. Portraits of what appeared to be ordinary folks from a particular time period. My mind flooded with thoughts and questions. I became curious about Charlie Cox and his connections with his community in Benton County. Today, we are joined by the curator of the Charlie Cox Collection, glass plate images of Benton County from the early 1900s, Joe W. Moody. He specializes in digitizing and processing audio and visual materials. Judy Cox Andrews is a native of Benton County, Mississippi. She is a retired professional photographer and a graduate of Ashland High School and Mississippi State College for Women. Please help me welcome Joe Moody and Judy Cox Andrews.
Thank you so much for having us today and for everybody for showing up. Really appreciate it. I'm going to do my best to talk a little bit about this collection and what I've done with it. But the real honor is that I'm here with Judy Cox Andrews, who was the donor of the collection, and I'm sure that she'll have a lot of questions that she can answer from you all. Just a quick, they've already been thanked, but I really want to thank the people in the center, Dr. Katie McKee, Afton Thomas as well, and Andrew Bryant, who was a real big help during this whole time. Also, Dr. Lee McWhite and also Catherine Tudor helped a lot with the editing and writing. Thanks to Brian Corrigan for the interview on the podcast. There's a podcast interview with the two of us that you can check out on Spotify and YouTube. Thanks for everybody in Special Collections. Greg Johnson for the guidance as well. And the Benton County Historical Association. Judy Goddard, where are you at? Yeah, there you are. Thank you so much for everything that we've talked a lot, and I really appreciate that. And of course, Judy Cox Andrews, and I also need to mention Sarah Catherine Glass, who did all the printing of the prints outside. All right, so I wanted to mention a couple of things about this. I've been here a little over a year. I was working the desk at Special Collections, and Judy Cox Andrews came in with a big donation of glass plate negatives, and I was like intrigued. What is that? What can I do with that? I quickly learned that, well, I want to figure out everything I can about glass plate negatives. I ended up going to New York, speaking with people at New York University and the New York Municipal Archives, and looking at their equipment and trying to figure out, like, how best can I achieve what I want to with digitizing these images. I quickly found out that they have very expensive equipment in New York. And we maybe not so much. So what I ended up doing is using the traditional way of with the camera overhead. And I got this fancy light board, German light board. I found out that I needed to raise the glass. So I just cut out a piece of cardboard. A lot of it I ended up doing kind of do it yourself, kind of in a way to digitize these plates. But I wanted to digitize them in a way that kind of shows how they look, okay? Rather than, because Judy, and she can speak to this, but she had already digitized these, and you can see them at Benton County, at the courthouse down there with the Historical Association. And the images that she's digitized, they're amazing. She has a history in photography, and you can ask her about it. So what I tried to do is just to show exactly how these look, and a lot of them you can see as you look into the collection online. You can see that their cracks are in there. You can see how imperfect this medium can be. But also, I think you can see as well, like how wonderful these images can be from glass plate negatives. This is a glass plate negative as an example there. And in the hallway, I brought one of them so you can see as well. And Judy brought one as well. So I want you to get a sense of what these are, the size of them. But yeah, I think you'll agree, especially once you start looking into the collection, that it does produce an amazing image. Just so that I can get out of the way for a little while, I do want to mention that the process took about a year. And it was held up a bit because they had to build more boxes and there was a whole story. But it took about a year to get all of these, processed, and the metadata and all these sorts of things. So I've kind of lived with this collection for about a year. And I have a couple of workmates that work with me out at the annex, and I appreciate you dealing with the darkness in the annex, because I was constantly needing the dark room and trying to get all these images and preserve them. And it's been a pleasure to work on this collection. But let's dig a little deeper into the collection and ask the question, well, who was Charlie Cox? And I think a good way to approach that is by speaking with his granddaughter, Judy Cox Andrews. So can we get another round?
Guess what? I didn't know my grandfather. He died 2 years before I was born. And so what I have to lean on are the stories that his family told. And some of the, I think he was a kind of a zany person. He liked to do new and different things. And he was real interested in machinery, new machinery, and must have been interested in people. And he really liked funny things too. And you'll see some of those in these images. I knew the negatives existed because family members had mentioned them, but they were in a loft and could only be accessed through the outside of the house, probably using a 20 to 40 foot ladder. And so it wasn't until the early 1980s that my brother agreed to go up into that attic. It had a tin roof, and it had, of course, there was no climate control up there. And he agreed to go up into the attic. They were very heavy, the negatives. And he went up there and he would hand them down to me. I was a lot younger in the early 1980s. And so I started looking through them, and some of them were, they were so dirty. Dirt daubers had built nests on the boxes, and I couldn't tell which side was the emulsion side and which side was just the glass. And so I had to, and I didn't have Google either. And so I didn't know, didn't have a source for what to do with them. So it was trial and error. My grandfather liked to experiment with new and different things, and I didn't realize that I knew photographers and farmers were creative and knew about the art of making do, but I didn't know that professors knew about the art of making do too. So I made do with what I had, and so and could get access to. And my grandfather made do by using sometimes quilts for the background. He had a kind of an elaborate background with a staircase and what looked like velvet curtains and with fringe on them. And if the lighting, and all these were done, or for the most part, outside. There were no, well, there wasn't any electricity, for one thing, there. It wasn't until about 1936 that Benton County got electricity there. And so he would have to do these photographs outside. And so his backgrounds were improvised too. And sometimes they'd tack a quilt or the background up on the side of the barn and make these pictures in front of it. And most of them were like full-length pictures. And so a lot of times the other things that were in the background, the junky things behind the ornate background would show, including one with a cow coming out from the background. So he couldn't really crop after the fact. The images were contact prints, and so the negatives were anywhere from 2 1/4 square to 5 by 7. The 5 by 7 was the largest that he had, and there was no one larger. And I'm assuming that he took the negative and placed it in the frame, and he could print 2 sizes at one time. He could do a double exposure on his camera. I did some accidentally when I was a photographer, but he did them on purpose. And I'm assuming he just had to stick this out the window or the door from his dark room and bring it in and develop it. And would you pass the glass negatives around? I taped the edges of them. They're not normally taped, but I didn't want anybody to go out with a cut hand or anything. These are rejects, and if you hold them up to light, you might be able to see some of the images. But he definitely knew about the art of making do and would improvise when he didn't have what he needed. He traveled, probably didn't travel very far. Maybe he went to Holly Springs, I think, but most of the images were in Benton County. He liked to make photographs of people who were working, and just we were related to most of the people in Benton County. So if you're talking to someone from Benton County about somebody in Benton County, be careful. Because you may be talking about somebody's cousin or so, and I thought sometimes we're related by marriage or blood, and so I thought sometimes I'm grateful we don't look like the kid that was in Deliverance, but we knew just about everybody, and I don't think that my grandfather made a living as a photographer. It might have been an avocation, but since he photographed so many friends and family, I know from my experience as a photographer, you don't make much money making pictures of friends and family. So he would photograph people, I think, that he was just interested in. The people that people use different kinds of props, and sometimes they probably made a special request that he photograph them with something that they treasured. And some of them, he really liked to be funny, and so I suppose hanging with a cigarette hanging out of your mouth might have been funny then. I don't think they were lit. And these ladies, I knew one of them, her name was Miss Bessie Holbrook, and she, knowing some of these ladies, I don't think that they would be real happy with the cigarette.
Okay. Well, how about this picture with what is the deal with the motorcycle?
He ordered a motorcycle from Sears in Memphis, and he went to pick up the motorcycle and at the railroad station in Holly Springs. Holly Springs is maybe 20 miles from where we lived, and so he wanted to pick this motorcycle up and started to ride it back, and it threw him. And so he left it and went back to Liberty Road in Ashland, and I guess got a wagon and went back to pick it up. That is my father that's on that motorcycle. Looks like a real dangerous way to pose. I've tried to look to see if there was somebody on the other side of that, but no, that's him with the motorcycle. Anyway, when he'd go around Benton County on this motorcycle, he probably upset some livestock and maybe some people. They didn't. That probably had not seen a motorcycle before.
So would he usually come out to take the picture with? Was this his partner that he would take pictures with?
Yes.
And they would show up and to someone's land or?
Right. My grandfather had a cleft lip, and so he would have this friend, a partner, to go out and make appointments for the photograph for, with families and all, so that they'd be ready. Some of these families really dressed up for the pictures. And so he would have them his friend to go and book the appointment, and then he would bring, go in the next week or so and make the photograph, bring it back to his house, develop the negative and print it. And he had this same friend to go back and sell for him. There are some expressions in some of the photographs that lead me to believe that those expressions were caused by, there's one where this lady is looking, forward like she'd never seen this cleft lip before. Back then, surgery wasn't easily available for the cleft lip, and I would think that there would be some difficulty in a baby nursing with a lip like that. So some of them didn't live long. But when he was 40 years old, he was able to go to Memphis to have this cleft lip repaired. To my knowledge, he didn't have a speech impediment. I asked people about that, and they didn't seem to think that he did. He liked to entertain his children. You'll see some photographs with him dressed up as a woman, and he would do skits for them to entertain them, which he made up the skits. And so he really, I think, enjoyed his children. He was 20 years older than his wife, and so she kind of was growing up along with him, under him, and so she had some difficult times too. She lost her first child when she was carrying my father. Let's see.
So this image I believe is the one that you're talking about, right? I really like how this captures what he would do. With the cow. Right. So yeah, the natural light, and it can't be cropped like it is these days. So you really get to see. Look, he just brought out this big backdrop, right there in a cow field. I love that. It shows exactly, and as you can see, everybody's dressing up for the occasion. Also, sometimes families or people that they were taking their portrait, they would bring some sort of possession that they felt was, really important to them, right? And one of them, like this gun, for example, which I guess, didn't your grandfather also, or was it somebody in your family that made gun stocks? Or
my grandfather was a gunsmith and a woodworker, and so he could make a stock out of walnut that it looked like the metal was born in that walnut stock. It fit perfectly. He later taught this skill to my father and my uncle, who continued making gun stocks until their deaths. And another thing that he did with woodworking was, at one time he had a contract with Ford Motor Company to make wooden spokes.
Wow.
And I didn't know that cars were ever made with wooden spokes. They were made with wooden spokes, and I think they stopped that in 1927. He sent the first batch to wherever they send them, and by train from Holly Springs, and they accepted them and paid for them. Then the next batch he sent, they rejected, and saying that the wood had not been seasoned properly, and he had no source for wood that had been seasoned for that long. and I don't know how long it takes, but he had no source. So he would have been a much wealthier man if he could have made all of those spokes.
Well, that leads me to something I wanted to talk about, the economy of the area. So what was, I noticed there are quite a few pictures of work in the area. So what was going on during that time?
The one you see on the left is, they're making barrel staves. And this was done, there's a steam engine in the background to do the cutting. There was a lot of timber in Benton County at that time. And so they harvested that timber. In fact, the houses that were on our property were built from timber on the land there. The next one, the one next to it,
Oh, sorry.
is a pea sheller. And I suppose it was a steam driven. I don't know anything about pea shellers, except I know how to shell peas. And there's a fella in the background that has, you can see there's something on his nose. And he was probably allergic to the dust. You can see the dust flying out from that pea sheller also. And so he was probably trying to avoid his allergy.
That makes sense.
And let's see, there.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that. Sorry to break in. I wanted to say that a lot of these pictures, instead of just being portraits, I mean, you get things like this where you see people like, out doing things they do in everyday life. I thought that like a picture like this, I think it's just fascinating. Not only because it's a great image, but also it just shows something other than just posing.
And that is Miss Molly Moody, and she was the mother of one of my favorite people, one of my grandmother's friends, Miss Bessie Hallbrook. And so that makes it special. And two, you can see the very fibers, the weave in her clothes, the apron that she has on. And I have noticed that the lighting is just wonderful in his images. You can see Ms. Moody's shadow behind it, which probably means it was late in the afternoon. The shadow's long, and you notice the buildings, the chicken houses, and all how primitive they are.
That's a wonderful picture.
The lady is probably a Chickasaw Indian, and some people thought that she wasn't a woman, but it's just those chiseled features. And then on the other side is her husband, who's very proud of his pocket watch.
So as you were saying, sometimes people show what their prized possessions, watch, a cane. Okay, this is a great photo. Now, this guy, the guy holding the pistol on the right, he shows up in a lot of the photographs. Who is that? Is it Elijah? Is that right, Elijah?
That is Elijah Cox.
Elijah.
He was the best looking of those Cox boys. And he was the older brother. And I don't know if it was their idea to pose this way for this picture or if it was my grandfather's idea. They sure were clowning around. And sometimes I guess it was kind of spontaneous. They would think of a way to do something and just do it for entertainment. This is another reason why I don't believe that he made his living as a photographer.
Well, I tell you also, there's a few images related to politics. One of them being a political event that happened at the courthouse in Benton County.
It was, I suppose, a political rally, and I looked very closely, and there were no women there. So, but they were dressed up, and I could see the stump that the politicians stood on next to the courthouse door. I mean, it was a real stump. So that's where they get stumping for a candidate. Another thing, on October the 27th, 1909, President Taft, William Howard Taft, came to Memphis, and he didn't have a very notable reign as president, but he was the largest president we ever had. They had to bring in a special bathtub for him because of his size. And my grandfather was somewhere up in the stands, so and they didn't have telephoto lenses. It was just one lens, and you pretty much had to stay where you were when you set up because it was a large camera and moving it quickly wasn't going to work. And it was too bad if somebody stepped between your camera and your subject, because it's unlikely that you could change glass plates fast enough to get the image you wanted.
And speaking on that, so the example I have, I know she's passing around the glass plates, but I have an example of another one in the front of this one, of the two guys smoking cigarettes. It was a different size. It was a smaller one. It was a square one. So there are a handful of these. The one on the right has really made an impression on quite a few people. I've had quite a few people say that this is an image that sticks with them. Do you know anything about the woman on the right?
This lady, of course, was blind, and she lived on the farm that McGoy's lived on in Tipper Bottom, I believe is where it was. And Judy, you sent me the name of the lady, and I don't. Okay, and she was, like I said, she was blind. And she did housework for the family whose place she lived on. Back then, there was no financial aid for, no state or federal aid for people with handicaps. So she probably did things like wash clothes and things like that. They put a line between her house and theirs so that she could make it from her house to theirs.
That is amazing. So I just wanted to let you guys know, because we're getting close to the time allotted for questions and whatnot. I'm going to forget a ton of people that I should be forgetting, but another person is Michelle Emanuel, who has helped with digitizing all these things. So all of the images that I have digitized, they are up on our digital repository. There are a handful of the images that you need to request because there were pictures of possibly deceased people, and so out of respect for the families, we've kind of made them available for. It was something that was common at the time, but something that we've decided not to show digitally, but you can request for research purposes, for example. But that is the link to the digital repository. Yeah, that's so. I wanted. There are a lot of images. I just picked a handful, but I think I've heard a lot of feedback about how impressed people are with these images and this photographer in this time period.